Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is Wednesday morning at 10:04. So I hope everyone's doing good. Spring is coming up on Thursday, my dad's birthday. It's always easy to remember those two things because of those change of the season with spring and my dad's birthday. So yeah, it's going pretty good here at Film Fanatic headquarters. Been cranking out the videos and got some potentially good things coming up as far as interview segments and all those things. So, and again, there's always one of the things I'm always doing with this channel is I'm always, you know, brainstorming, coming up with new ideas to talk about all of these amazing films that I love. And I always realize, wow, there's so much stuff to still talk about. And there's so many things that in the film world that, for me, are just always inspiring. So today's going to be a big show with a little bit of a relatively big announcement that is still, I'm kind of working it out, but I know that there's interest. I feel like it's worth talking about, and I can kind of make an announcement. So, so today's show is going to be on my favorite boutique label that exists today, and that is Mondo Macabro. I'm going to be talking about all things Mondo Macabro. For me, they are hands down my favorite label. They specialize in some of the most obscure, most underground and deranged films I've ever come across. Their specialty is kind of Asian cinema, it seems, but they truly have this kind of European flair of digging into the depths of things that, you know, in this crazy world that we live in. And I think when it comes to physical media, you know, if you're a collector of film and if you're into some bizarro shit, it's the best time to be alive, really. And again, there's so many amazing labels out there: Blue Underground, Severin, Arrow. Um, there's countless labels that are. I noticed too. There are more and more things kind of popping up, more different. There's even more variety now as far as boutique labels. I had said before that I felt like things were starting to kind of, it was hitting it really hard as far as all of these releases, about a few years ago, and then it was kind of this explosion of exploitation movies, with all of these totally whacked movies getting just getting this immaculate treatment with all of these Blu-ray releases and then 4K, just the most obscure films you can think of, and just wild. And then I had mentioned in the show the other day, there's always been this, when it comes to physical media, there's always kind of been this dark cloud, in the distance with, streaming and the impact of what that's been doing to physical media and the digital age that we live in. And it's a balance because I think, on one hand, you have the competitors being, with all these streaming companies, and people can watch things at the comfort of their own home. And, that also affects everything. I see it greatly affecting music, turnouts to shows, the way people go about socializing these days, dinner plans. I mean, all of those things are now really greatly affected by the digital age. But I remember it was a seismic thing when Best Buy, the big box chain store that for years sold DVDs and they got into Blu-rays quite a bit, when it was announced that they were doing away with their entire physical media section, and even going as far as saying that they were not going to be selling anything even on the website as far as physical media. It was, well, it gave me a sense of urgency, being that, man, I'm going to scoop up as many of these movies as I can, because they could be gone someday. Because it was, I almost feel like, as a collector and as a lover of these wild movies, I I felt like I'm not just a collector, because there are people out there that just buy movies and then they just look at it where they're almost like curating a museum, and they buy all these titles. They might watch them, they might not even watch them, and they just kind of seal them away. But I watch them all numerous times. I enjoy them. I immerse myself in them. So it's both for me. And I felt like, wow, this is a situation where maybe it's too good to be true, and it's nothing lasts forever. And so when I saw that happen, that big announcement, there was all of this talk, from Best Buy, that it was going to have this massive ripple effect, which it did, and a lot of other companies were starting to cut back. Other stores, Walmart and what have you, Target, not Target, but a couple other big box stores where physical media was a thing, and so Best Buy did away with everything, and then I saw this ripple effect, even going to my beloved store, my favorite place to be, my home away from home, Bull Moose. I started seeing. It seemed like all of a sudden, within a few weeks of this big thing happening, this big huge change, that it had this massive ripple effect, and I started to feel that it was even affecting places like Bull Moose, where I was seeing less and less exploitation movies being sold. And I was like, shit, like suddenly it was looking really dismal. You go to in the past, you go to the horror section, Blu-rays or 4Ks, and they have your, commercial horror films, movies like, I don't know, like the Conjuring or The Exorcist, films like that. But part of the love of going was, whenever I would go to buy movies, like I buy a lot of, quote unquote normal movies and commercial movies. I love those films as well, but my passion is finding shit that is so obscure and so weird and just so underground. That's kind of my passion. So in my travels, you would dig. I would go straight to the horror section, where the DVDs were, and just dig through all of it and find all of this weird shit. And that's how I discovered Severin and Mondo Macabro. And and I started to see those titles kind of go away. But then the last 2 or 3 months, now when I go to Bull Moose, there's more of these movies, and I see even to where they have their own sections, like where you actually walk in some of the shops, and there are areas where it says boutique label, the boutique label section. And you go there, and it's literally all of these weirdo, obscure movies, and really rare limited editions, and they're separate from your more, say, conventional or popular horror films, or just films in general. And I was like, wow, like this is crazy. And from my perspective, it seems like it's getting bigger, and it seems like it's growing. So, which I never thought I would really see. So, but today's show is on my favorite label, because again, I think Mondo Macabro takes the deepest dive in the most obscure shit, and they just have the most. I think they really have. They're all like these super sleazy, low budget exploitation movies, but I think that the genres that they cover, there's more diversity that they present, and the releases that they have are just totally whacked and crazy. But they have such a wide variety of action movies to horror films to just totally surrealistic kind of nightmarish films, slasher films, yeah, genre films in the exploitation world that have elements of all of those things that you can't even really necessarily call them horror film or a pure action film or what have you. There's a lot of these films also I find have they'll pull from different genres, and they're not always like genre specific. Just incredible. The diversity is just astounding. And Mondo Macabro is it's an American based home video distribution company. It was founded in 2002 by Pete Toombs and Andy Stark. Their focus is releasing cult and exploitation films on DVD and Blu-ray, and was named after Toombs' 1997's book Mondo Macabro, The Weird and Wonderful World of Cinema Around the World. Basically, that's where the title Mondo Macabro came from. And my big announcement, and nothing is, it's not totally set in stone, but I reached out to them, and I think it's going to happen. But I'm going to be in another month or so. I reached out to Jared Owner, who is the one of the big guys at Mondo Macabra, who has been with them for a few years now, or maybe 10 years or so. He is in charge of the website for Mondo Macabra. They do massive sales off of their website. He does all the mail ordering. He does all the social media. He's like really running the entire program right now as far as their marketing and all these things. And I've seen lots of interviews with Jared Owner, and he's super. Seems like a super awesome guy, super knowledgeable when it comes to exploitation films. So I was able to find his reach out contact. I was able to find his contact information. Reached out to him, and he's definitely interested in coming on to the show and talking about Mondo Macabra and all things physical media. So I'm super excited. We're gonna try to set it up in another month or so. He's of course very very busy with Mondo Macabra, which is great to hear because they deserve to be really fucking busy because they rule. So stay tuned for that. So fingers crossed everything will work out. But I do know I did talk with him, and he seems very cool, and he is definitely on board with doing a show. So that will be very, very exciting for me to put that together, to interview him. And again, it's my favorite thing to do for this channel, and I haven't done a interview segment in a long time, but especially I'm very excited because of the prospect of getting him on the show, and it sounds like it's going to happen. And again, it's my favorite label out there, my favorite boutique label, so it'll be an honor, and I'm sure it's going to be eye-opening and a huge pleasure and a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. That will probably be in another month or so. So what I'm going to do today, since this is all about Mondo Macabro, I'm going to talk about all of the movies that I have from this label, to just give examples of like what I said a few minutes ago about how they have so much variety, and it's just incredible. And the other thing is every one of these movies, I literally took a chance, pretty much blind, and I just bought them. Their prices are really great too. That's one of the other things that I love about Mondo Macabra is I think the prices for their Blu-rays are just the best around. And the other thing is the quality is just phenomenal. I mean, the transfers are incredible. They always have really awesome special features included with each movie. The artwork, the whole design of the package of the DVD is just the best. And I've discovered so many great directors and, you know, Jess Franco, Paul Naschy. I mean, so many great people through Mondo Macabra that, now they're some of my favorite actors or directors, that really made up the world of sleazy exploitation. So I'm going to talk about, I dug out all my Mondo Macabra movies, and I'm going to just, do a show where I'm just going to run through them and talk more about Mondo Macabra, and we'll hopefully have some fun. So the first movie I'm going to talk about is actually a movie. I just went to Bull Moose last weekend on Saturday, and it actually has been quite a while since I bought any Mondo Macabro. I haven't seen for quite a while. I have a lot of their movies, but for a while, maybe 6 months or maybe more, I didn't really see any of their titles in any of the shops that I was going to. Whereas before, would see them all the time, usually always at Bull Moose. But when I went this past weekend, they had quite a few, and I was super excited. So I bought some new Mondo Macabro. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Hungry Snake Woman. This is one. This is the one I just bought. I have not actually watched it yet. It is from 1986, and this looks like a pretty wild movie. I have not seen this movie, and It's an Indonesian film. It's Asian. They really specialize, I think, in a lot of Asian and Indonesian films. But this came out in 1986. And again, all kinds of special features on here. I'm really excited to watch this. I have heard really incredible things about this film. Still got it in the package, but I'm going to watch this soon. And so stay tuned. There'll be a review for this at some point. So this is the only one in this pack in this grouping of all of these films today that I haven't watched. The next film is The Killer. The Killer is Not Alone. This is a Spanish film and from '73. I just put up a show on this movie. This movie is absolutely incredible. Just I just this was bought this past weekend. I did watch this one, but amazing, like serial killer film. It's a Spanish film, definitely like a giallo inspired movie. Just whacked and just crazy, but beautiful movie. I've only seen this once. Amazing. And as you'll see as I continue on here, the again, like I said a few times before, the level of diversity of different kinds of exploitation movies that they have is just wild. This next movie is super badass. I've watched this multiple times, and that is Hunting Ground. I've had this for quite a while. This is from 1980, 1983. This is another Spanish film. I've watched this movie. This is kind of like a revenge movie, and this is wow, super badass. Like uber violent, like graphic violence at the end, and it's a balls to the wall revenge movie, but super badass. Hunting Ground. I can't recommend this movie enough. I've done shows, I've done videos on all of these movies. I think pretty much that I've talked about. Some of them I've just done like maybe one video, and they were done quite a couple of years ago. But this is a killer movie. I've seen this multiple times. I'm gonna definitely watch it again pretty soon because it's just so badass. Highly recommend it. Kind of similar, like if you're into films like I Spit on Your Grave, like real or another really great kind of exploitation movie that's just a total badass kind of revenge story, Thriller, which is amazing. But if you like exploitation movies that are uber violent but they're revenge movies, badass, badass. This movie was a huge movie for me because this really got me into Paul Naschy. This was the first film I ever saw that starred Paul Naschy. And again, it was one of those things where I saw some of the Paul Naschy films when I was a kid, particularly some of the old school werewolf films that he made. And he was most well known for all of the werewolf roles that he played. But I didn't put two and two together. I didn't really know at that young age that was Paul Naschy. But this film, Howl of the Devil, which is another Spanish film, which came out in '88, and it was directed and written by Paul Naschy and stars Paul Naschy in multiple roles. This was the movie that I bought this a few years back, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and this single-handedly made me an obsessed or an obsessive fan of Paul Naschy. And Paul Naschy is one of my all-time favorites. I have a ton of his movies now, where he just starred in, directed, and he was such an amazing figure in the world of exploitation. Uber talented. He could do pretty much anything. But this Howl the Devil, this movie is super awesome. I've watched this multiple times as well. This was the movie that did it for me, that reintroduced me to Paul Naschy and really got me into him. So I can't recommend this movie enough. I bought this. This was one of the first Mondo Macabro movies that I bought. Killer movie. This next movie is just it's I almost feel like, the unique thing with Mondo Macabro is, yeah, they're at the end of the day, they're just like real low budget, trashy films. But I think that there are aspects of these movies that, and they're all European, also, or essentially foreign films. But I almost feel like these films are really great because, people, who are maybe not into, really sleazy, really violent exploitation movies, because they feel like they're just too graphic for them. I think a lot of Mono Cabra's titles could be considered, almost art house films, because they some of their films have such a richness to them, and they're actually really beautiful films. And I would almost consider some of their films to be, they are sleazy trash, but they have a lot of aspects to them where you could consider them to be really, just really great foreign films or high, art films, because of some of the storylines are really great, really original, the cinematography, music. And I've watched some of these films with a friend who is not really into those kinds of things, the really violent, psychosexual films, or, real extreme horror films. But we've watched a lot of these films together, and she really loved them and thought, wow, like these have something, there's something special about some of these films. And this is one of them. This movie, Silop, the daughters daughters of Eve. This movie is completely insane, and it's breathtakingly beautiful. It's Again, it's got this wild juxtaposition of where it's so beautifully shot, masterfully shot. This movie is kind of a masterpiece, and I've seen this movie multiple times, and I really want to rewatch this movie. But it's so lush and gorgeous, and yet this movie is so incredibly fucked up and disturbing. But it's gorgeous. Like it's so well, I think, directed and put together that it can easily appeal to people who are maybe not into exploitation movies because it's done so well. And this also came out. This is an Indonesian film. This came out in '86. I bought this a few years ago. What This movie's a masterpiece. Just an epic film, and it's tragic, horrible. It's grotesque. It's so violent, but yet it's absolutely gorgeous and just an epic film. Beautiful, beautiful movie. Next up, and you'll hear me use the words masterpiece quite a bit because that's how highly I regard Mondo Macabro's films. And this next film is by one of my, or I should say, my favorite, pretty much my favorite horror director of all time. Definitely hands down, my easily my favorite Italian director of all time. But overall, my favorite overall in just the world of horror, my favorite director of all time, Lucio Fulci. And they put out this amazing edition of this incredible film, A Lizard in a Woman's Skin. This movie is just a fucking masterpiece. It's super trippy. I feel like every time I watch this film, I feel like I'm on acid. It's such a hallucinatory experience. It's a giallo movie, and it's super trippy. It's wild. It's disturbing. It's really such a great mystery. It's I don't know. It's like esoteric. I mean, it's such a visual feast to watch this movie. This is one of my favorite Lucio Fulci films. He also, I mean, Lucio Fulci's mostly well known, or mostly known as, you know,
Powering off.
as a horror director, especially with, the Gates of Hell trilogy films. But he did all kinds of movies. I mean, he did a ton of giallo films. He did war films. He even did a few comedies. He did a lot of different genres, but this is definitely one of his best. This is one of the greatest giallo films ever made. And oh my God, this movie is just absolutely stunning. 71, A Lizard in Woman's Skin. I cannot recommend this movie enough. This is one of my favorite films of my favorite director, and this is one of my favorite Blu-rays that I own. And this was put out. I bought this a few years back too. I've watched this also multiple times. Masterpiece right here. And getting back to Paul Naschy, this is probably the best film that Paul Naschy has ever done. Just an epic fucking film. One of the greatest werewolf movies ever made. And that is The Beast and the Magic Sword. This came out in 1983. It's another Spanish film. It's such a mythical story. It's such a great horror film, and it's easily one of the greatest werewolf movies ever made. And there's so many werewolf films and kind of occult horror based horror films that Paul Naschy was involved in or starred in. And I have to say, this is probably overall his best movie he's ever done, all around. And his acting is just incredible. It's such an awesome, bizarro film as well. The Beast and the Magic Sword. This movie is an utter masterpiece, and I can never. I did. I bought a big box set of Paul Naschy films a few months ago, and I did a big show on all of those films. And amazing. But this is primetime Paul Naschy. It doesn't get any better than this. This is his best film, I think. And it's one of the top tier, one of the best werewolf films ever made as well. Amazing, amazing film. Now we're getting into some of the super bizarro films, some of the Japanese and Asian films. This is a Japanese film that came out in 73. A haunted Turkish bathhouse. This movie is totally fucking whacked and bizarre. It's like a supernatural ghost kind of story. It's a horror film. There is not for the faint of heart. There is some seriously fucked up things that happen in this movie. Around torture and sadomasochism. But what a fucking, and it's like a fever dream. But this movie is just fucking bananas. It's one of the most bizarre movies I've ever seen. Probably one of the most outrageous movies I've ever seen. And it has all of these different genres kind of thrown in. You have like a ghost story. You have it's like a supernatural film. It's a pure horror film. It's kind of a torture film. It's just wild. This came out in 73. This is a masterpiece, though. But I will say, you have to strap yourself in because this is a fucking wild ride. And again, that's why I love Mondo Macabro because they really push the envelope. I mean, these movies really push the envelope as far as like exploring psychosexual themes, taboos, things that maybe people are afraid to talk about. But this movie is just gonzo crazy. I love this movie to death. I've seen this quite a few times. It's a Japanese film. Geez, just amazing. Amazing film. This next film is kind of more. It's another Japanese film. It is. It came out in. This is an old school film too, 1963. This is a little bit more of a straightforward compared to the last film. I would say it's a little bit more of a straightforward um, ghost story, like a gothic ghost story, but it's just amazing. House of Terrors, amazing. I bought both of these Japanese films at the same time, and this movie is amazing. I've only seen this once, but I need to watch this again. But it definitely has a classic kind of gothic ghost story vibe to it, and it's all black and white. The cinematography is just incredible, and it's but again, it's not a straight ahead story or a straight ahead narrative. It's very bizarre. It's like a weird, surreal dream that you feel like you're trapped in. But this is an incredible movie, House of Terrors, 1963. It's old school as all hell. Amazing, amazing film, amazing film. Next up is In the Folds of the Flesh. This is another Spanish film. A ton of Spanish films that they put out. So many Spanish releases. This came out in '71. This movie is really awesome too. It's kind of a giallo film, very very cool. I very very stylized. It's awesome. I love this movie. I've only seen this once or twice. I need to rewatch this movie. I might even watch this again tonight. But super awesome film. It's I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's kind of a giallo film. It's very mysterious. There is a little bit of darkness in this movie, but really really cool. It's kind of a slow burn. I've only watched this again like once or twice, and it's been a while, and I kind of want to watch this again. But old school film again. All the titles, just going through all these titles, I just realized how you know Mondo Macabro is just all over the place. I mean, all these movies are so different from each other, but just amazing. But the one thing they have in common is that they tend to be all pretty whacked and pretty crazy. So the wild side of world cinema. So that's what they're all about. But amazing film, really really great. In the Folds of Flesh. And again, all of these titles, these are all movies I literally just took a chance on seeing. I'm buying for the first time, and and there is not one Mondo Macabre film that I've bought that I've been like, what, that was a clunker. I wish I didn't buy it. It's always like, yep, that was awesome. I can't wait to watch it again. And I'm at a point now, and that's what happened to me last week, and it's happened to me the last few times that I've bought in some Mondo Macabre, is I'm at a point now, if I'm in the shop, at Bull Moose or something, because you're not going to really find Mondo Macabre anywhere else. If I see any film with a Mondo Macabre label, I'm gonna just snag it up. I'm just gonna buy it because they, you just know they're gonna be, that movie is going to be fucking wild. And like I said, the prices are just phenomenal. Um, this is a movie. This was one of the first Mondo Macabre films, and this movie is a complete fucking masterpiece, and kind of one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen, and that is The Fan. I've actually heard a lot of people talk about this movie quite a bit, and my God, this movie is such a fucking trip. This is a German film, and it came out in '83. Most of their titles are in the late '70s, early '80s, but they do. I mean, like House of Terrors, they do have some really old school films too. And this came out in '82, I believe it. Yeah, it's a German film. The Fan. Oh my God, this movie! My jaw dropped at the end of this movie. I was like, yeah, this movie is it's a slow burn. It's a really good kind of character study. It's so beautifully shot, but yet it's so fucking horrific, and just like every now and then you see a film where it will go into areas that you never thought you'd ever see, and this is one of those movies. It's really about the story with this movie is about this girl who is obsessed with this rock star, and she, you know, it follows her journey, and she becomes more and more obsessed with this rock star, and they eventually meet by chance, and they end up having this affair, and then they end up like building this life together, but then things get really fucked up. And man, amazing, amazing film. Amazing film. This is, and again, this was one of the first Mondo Macabro films I ever saw. And this is, again, another one of those films that I really, it's so beautifully shot and so beautifully put together. Again, it's a sleazy, trashy, low budget exploitation movie, but at the same time, it's so well done that I would consider this an art house film or a foreign film for that matter. These are all foreign films, but it's so good that I think people who are not into trash cinema would love this movie because it's so well done and so well conceived and executed. Amazing. The music is incredible. Total 80s. Yeah. And this next title here, Succubus, which I also bought. This might have been one of the first Mondo Macabro titles that I bought when I first discovered them. So I've had this for quite a while. This came out in 19, 1989. It's I believe, another German film, Succubus. Incredible, incredible movie. Again, there's things in this movie that are just so fucked up and disturbing that it's almost hard to watch. But it's so well done that you can't help but watch it and get through the shocking moments of this movie. But it's essentially these two men that live in this very isolated area and these two guys that are living in this incredibly isolated area. They are farmers, and they come across this woman who is very mysterious and really turns their world upside down. And oh my god, like, it's so, and again, the cinematography is just breathtaking. Super fucked up. It's a ghost story. It's definitely a supernatural based movie, but just gonzo crazy. That's the thing too about Mondo Macabro is they'll take an action movie, or they'll take a giallo thing, giallo vibe or a story or a horror story, and they'll like kind of turn it upside down and and with most of these films, and they'll add so many different elements that are kind of maybe outside of like the genre specific thing, so where it almost is does an injustice if you call the movie a straight up horror film, because there's so many different things going on in this movie. Amazing film. Just a trip, and again, really disturbing. There's some moments in this film that are just really hard to watch, but wow, wild, wild shit. Amazing film. I've seen this movie quite a few times as well, but I love this movie. Next up is, I think, one of the most disturbing movies ever made, and I think it's definitely one that's a theme here. This movie goes into taboos like no other. A movie that could not be made today, but I love this movie to death, and that is Don't Deliver Us from Evil. Just totally fucked up cinema right here. 71, this came out. And I think this is a German. I think this is a German film. But my God, super fucked up. one of the things that you always hear about that's like when it comes to films, like a taboo that can't be shown or should not be shown are children getting killed. Um, and this film explores some of those things. I think one of the creepiest things are films that have characters that are children and they are homicidal maniacs and they are killing people. That has this just is well just fucked up, and it just opens up. There's a lot to unpack around that, and this film really explores that. It explores so many different dark taboos, but oh my god, what an amazing movie! And I've seen this movie a few times. I can't wait to rewatch this. This came out in '71. Yeah, one of the most disturbing movies ever made, and I think that this is the definition of a movie that could not be made today. But amazing, amazing film. This is one of my favorite Mondo Macabro films as well. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about this. I've actually heard this movie talked a lot about because of how controversial this movie is. But man, it's just badass movie. But some of these films are not for the faint at heart, but they are so worth checking out because they will rattle your fucking cage. And finally, this is the last title that I have from On Macabre, which again is another masterpiece. That's a word I'm using a lot here. And I've seen this movie multiple times. And this movie is totally fucking whacked. Totally whacked. Love Brides of the Blood Money. Love Brides of the Blood Mummy. This came out in '73. This movie is super, super bizarro. It's definitely, there's a lot of like bondage and S&M in this movie, and vampirism. It's, it takes, the whole kind of mythological or thing that we've seen, say, with like mummy films, most notably Boris Karloff, but it takes that and fuses it with sadomasochism and bondage and fetish and vampirism. Super bizarre, and it's really cheesy too. That's the thing. This is probably one of the most cheesiest or trashiest films that they have that I own, and it's just but it's so awesome. It's so bad it's good. It's definitely that kind of movie. um yeah, it's got to be one of the trashiest movies that they've done, and I love this movie to death. And it's super bizarre, and again, it goes into some pretty murky psychosexual depths, but amazing, amazing film. So that is all of my films that I have from Anna Macabra. So they have an endless amount of other films that I need to get, and I will, in my travels seek out. But I can't recommend any of their film. I can never recommend any film by Mondo Macabro that they put out enough. If you see any of their films, snag it up because they fucking rule. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.